Okay, hi Yael. Good morning to you and good evening for our Indian viewers. I'm Abhivyakti. I'm from Prati Sandhi. We're an organization working towards increasing sexual health awareness in India currently. So, you are doing a similar kind of work. You're a sex educator. So we're very glad for that you agreed for this interview with us. So, how are you doing
Thank you for
today?
having me. I'm doing well. It's a really cloudy day, but I'm excited to speak with you. I'm excited by your work.
Same here, same here. So, why don't you just start by telling us a bit about yourself?
Sure. So I'm a sex educator, sexologist, sex coach. And what that means is I create spaces for non judgmental conversations around topics that are super important to people. And so, sex, of course, but it's so much more than what people think of. So, it's not just STIs and condoms and contraception, but it's also how you feel about your body, how to make boundaries, how to communicate your needs, desires, and wants, how to feel confident in your sexuality and your gender and your orientation. And so it's so much, right? And that's the kind of work that I dedicate myself to here.
That's wonderful. It's just so great to meet others who are working towards the same thing that we are. Okay, so
Yeah, it feels good.
yeah, it really does. So, just a very simple question: that what does it really mean to be a queer person?
Great. Queer confuses lots of people, so
Yeah.
totally good question. Queer at its most basic form means if it's a sexual orientation, not straight, right? So you might be someone who likes multiple genders, you might be someone who mostly likes one gender, but if you don't just like the gender that is considered your opposite, then you can identify as queer. But because the term, like every other term, has a sad, unfortunate, and biasing history,
Mm.
some people don't like the term. But for those of us who do, it just feels really great because it's like, I tell you I'm queer, and that does not tell you who I like to date, who I want to have sex with. It just tells you I'm not straight. And so only people who know me get to ask more questions, right? Or interviews, whatever. I'm happy to answer. But it creates this space of people being able to say, this is how I identify without giving too much information.
Okay, so queer is for all those who are not completely straight, right?
Yes. And it also for gender identity means that you're not cisgender. And cisgender means that if you were born and someone said, it's a boy, and today you say, I'm a boy, you are cis. Other things would be trans. And so queer gender means that you don't identify as a cis person.
Okay, thanks. That was a clarifying answer. So, okay, so you've been very vocal about how the topic of sexuality should be normalized, and you've been working towards the same. And it's great considering that Pratisandhi is aiming to do the same. So, in a country like India, where sexuality has always been a very hush hush topic, and it still continues to be a taboo, even though the country has modernized a bit. So, what do you feel is the way to go since the majority here still have a very conservative mindset?
Yeah, so I am a big believer in community led sex education. I don't think it is useful for me. I'm a Puerto Rican, New Yorker, Jewish woman from, right? Like, it does not make sense for me to be like, oh, people in India, this is how you should believe and this is what you should do. So I think the work of you, Pratisati, also the founder of Tickle.life, Shakun, does really great work. Sethi, I have a friend named Supriya who's going to be doing research, who's Indian as well, who's going to be doing research. I think that is super important, and that those of us in other countries are supportive of those efforts. And I think that in my experience, what has been useful is interweaving cultural beliefs with what it is that you're seeking to do. And so sometimes that's building off of community knowledge that already exists. And sometimes that's pinpointing what is the things that we need to change and unlearn
Hmm.
because they're not helping us in our goals. And in India, there's multiple religions, but if you, like, Islam has opportunities and examples of women empowerment and has sex positivity, as does the Hindu religion. And so the major religions that exist there, you can actually go through the books and be like, oh, here are examples pre-colonial times of how sexuality and women's empowerment, which is a big part of this as well, existed. And so how do we get back to that using our culture, using our traditions, so that it doesn't feel like a slap in the face to people, because they won't accept it if it feels
Yeah.
counter.
So, like basically, if we uh, take help from our culture or our religion, it will be more easier for people to believe in it because it has come from something they already believe in, right?
Exactly. Right. And so it's not teaching them something new, it's helping them recognize that this already existed, and so you're not going against your beliefs,
Yeah,
because we're taught that it's against our beliefs.
yeah, exactly. That's a very good point. Okay. And so another question is that do you think that we also need to emphasize on body positivity along with sexual health? And how do you think that the two are interrelated, if at all they are?
I believe that, yeah, I believe they are. I believe that true sexual liberation is only possible if we're free of all forms of oppression, right? There's so much work that we can do on ourselves, which is great and beautiful. And then there's also society, which has a huge impact on the way that we live our lives. And so, one form of oppression is fat phobia. And if you follow Sonali Rashtar, who's a American of Indian descent, she's at the Fat Sex Therapist on Instagram. She talks about how fat phobia is part of white supremacy, right? It's an ideal of white colonizers and white supremacy to control the body in this way, and to think that A, it should be white, B, it should be thin, like these certain constructs. And so I do think, like, being able to love your body, own your body, not compare it to what society is telling you. Like, another point from disability justice, right, is the idea that bodies are meant to be productive, that our value is based on whether or not we can produce for society, and that's very capitalistic. And so we have to be able to disengage all of those things and be able to respect people, that not because what they can create, not but because they're people deserve to be respected and cared for, and that's part of sexual liberation, that piece of body positivity.
Exactly, absolutely. Okay. So another question that I have here is that there exists a myth in talking about sexual health, especially in front of children, as it is seen that it could corrupt their mind and it may also be seen as provoking people, and which can lead into a rise in in the number of sexual harassment cases. So, what do you have to say about this?
I would like to see some numbers. I want someone to show me that education has led to sexual assault, because I would be so shocked if you could give me a legitimate study that said that. Legislation is not built off of science. It's not built off of facts. It's not built off of like sturdy evidence-based work. Legislation is built off of feelings of whoever is leading, right? They're like, this feels good. I think this will be like helpful to save the world. And it's like, but actually the science shows that that is the opposite of what we need, right? Like, that will in fact cause more problems. So we know that sex education leads to a decrease in unexpected pregnancies among teens. The countries in the world that have good sex education have low teen pregnancy rates. And there's nothing wrong with being a teen mother. If that is what you want, choose, and is culturally like right for you, fantastic. But in the US, there's a lot of people getting pregnant that don't want to be. They're just getting pregnant. And they get pregnant more frequently in the spaces that have abstinence only education, because you're not teaching teens how to take care of themselves on the things that they're naturally going to do, because sex is a natural part of life. And so that drives me bananas. And then that's just like the let's say the sexual health 101, but then there's the consent and healthy relationships and knowing yourself and feeling positive about your experiences. I get people who ask me, is masturbation bad? Masturbation is not bad, right? There's nothing wrong
Yeah,
with it. It's the safest form of sex that you can engage in. And so if you want to teach someone how to engage and not end up potentially being at risk for STIs, what have you, that should be a focus of your abstinence education, how to please yourself. But that's not, because it's not based in an attempt to actually address issues. It's an attempt to just push down and control people.
exactly. Like I mean, not all, but a lot of, you can see maybe orthodox, like parents with an orthodox mindset, or who believe very strongly in their culture. A lot of them might think, I don't want to, like put like like specific statement out there. A lot of them might think, and a lot of them actually do think, especially in India. That's what I've seen. That talking about sex in front of our child will corrupt. It is actually true in India that it will corrupt their mind, or no, they're too young to know about this. But as like but the children and teenagers these days are very eager to try out things and look into what it is, and that's what I believe, that without knowing what they're actually doing, they might
Mm-hmm.
just apart from the safety, I think they might even not be able to enjoy it if they do it without all the knowledge.
Because you don't know what's happening. You don't know how to, if you haven't had a conversation around what is sex and like what you might expect, then you might not know how to set boundaries. You might be ready for kissing with tongue and maybe touching each other, but you might not be ready for something else. And if you don't have that language, you have no way to protect your boundaries. And I mean, people don't like to talk about this, but babies masturbate, right? Like babies with vaginas and vulvas, will sit on their own heels and rock themselves. And that's because they're masturbating. Their clits feel good. They're playing with their clitorises. Like, it is such a natural piece. And people also equate sex with impurity. What makes sex impure? What about this
Exactly.
experience that is innately human feels impure? And so, as long as children, and like, I'm not saying that children should be having sex with each other, that's very different, but children will experiment with their bodies and they should be taught how to do so in a way that is societally acceptable, right? Like, you shouldn't play with yourself in public. That's not
Hmm.
appropriate. But that's because it's non-consensual to others.
Yeah.
However, learning about your body in your bedroom or in the bathroom, wherever you can find some privacy, totally cool. And so that whole idea of trying to shift people towards the knowledge doesn't make them want to have sex more. It just helps them, like you said, like make those decisions.
Yeah,
But I do
exactly.
think we have a very punishment and fear system. The intention is like, we're not going to teach you. And if you accidentally end up with an STI or pregnant, that is your punishment for being a human being with sexual desires, which is most of us. Only some
Yeah.
people are asexual. So it just, blah.
That's right. So, another question is like in a kind of a continuation only, that as modern as today's world gets, I mean, I think we've kind of already answered the question, but sex ed at school and university level does not get enough importance, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
this is kind of what we've already discussed, that children need to be taught, but like school and university is where we get most of our learning from. So I think that at school and university level, sex ed should have a lot of importance, and it gets very little importance. So why do you feel that this is still the case? I mean, the world seems to be modernizing and growing and developing. And what do you think that, you know, not not like a particular country, but in general, what can be done to get sex ed the importance that it needs, and to normalize it in people's minds that it's okay for your children to learn about what eventually will happen or might happen with them.
Mm-hmm. So education's a two-way street, right? Like the people that are facilitating that education, who are teaching or what have you, and then the people who are trying to absorb. And it's constantly a cycle. But also, if your educators are not prepared, are not well informed, and don't feel comfortable, it's not going to be a good educational experience. And so I know that some schools are trying to implement sexual health, but the teachers can't talk about sex because they feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
That's not going to be really good education. The university where I am currently at, where I moved to study more, to study health, behavior, and sex, has like a dozen per semester human sexuality courses. There's a ton of them. And they're being taught by amazing sexologists who love this work and who have no shame about talking about it. Like myself, people sometimes were like, oh, it's so brave to talk about these topics. And for me, it's not brave. It's like talking about it's raining, right? Like it is no different for me to talk about a penis or like intersex experience or what have you than it is to be like, oh, look, the trees are green today. The same thing. But we need to be able to have those conversations and feel comfortable having those conversations as we are trying to increase the number. Because if we say, okay, go into that classroom and talk about gender identity, and someone feels uncomfortable saying the word trans masculine, or someone feels uncomfortable talking about what are the options of gender presentation, what can that look like, then it's not going to actually fulfill. It's going to create additional issues in trying to get that information.
Yeah, yeah, that's absolutely right. So, so I think that a solution can be finding the right people to teach. I mean, first accepting that you need to teach such, like, maybe not in if you're not comfortable in detail, that at least the basics about sexuality, sexual health, sex, or and whatever is related. So at least first they need to realize that this is important and it has to be done, and then they need to find the people who feel the same. Only then I think
Yes.
they can feel comfortable.
And I think also like having, I don't necessarily think, and I'm not certified in any way, but having a general sense of values that you're trying to instill, because sexual health for me involves identity very much, and I don't think it's legitimate sexual health in the way that it's not legitimate feminism for me if it's not inclusive of all. And there are some folks who will go out there and use sexual health as an opportunity to spread hate about certain communities. And so I
Yeah.
think it's also useful that we talk about like what are the kind of values that we're trying to instill in young people,
Mhm.
um, as we spread that the desire to have more conversations.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And so, okay, a lot of people globally, I believe, still lack the knowledge about STDs or other sexually transmitted diseases or infections. So, what can be the strategies, if I may say, that one can use, or if not exactly the government, then even if a person who feels that, oh, in my community people should be knowing about this, not necessarily everyone has to get an STD or a HIV infection or a sexually transmitted infection to get to know about it. People should be aware in general. So what can be done to increase the awareness about it, and to also increase the normalcy around the subject, because that is also considered to be a very kind of a sin, or it is like infections are a form of impurity, but that's biologically they are considered to be impure for the society. If somebody has an HIV or STD, they're considered to be impure. Their existence has
Mm-hmm.
can be declared as impure. So how can we?
Like, I think just that, right? Like the idea that someone becomes impure because they have an STI, like that is one of the main things we need to change. People are scared to get tested because
Hmm.
they don't want the stigma of having to need the test, which means that they're sexually active, or B, finding out that they are positive for something because then there's something wrong with them, right? When people ask, are you clean? It's like, yeah, I just showered. I don't have dirt under my nails. That idea that someone's cleanliness is tied to their STI status is very stigmatizing, right? The
Exactly.
A
Like,
good way to ask is, have you been tested? What is your sexual health status? Right? That neutralizes those conversations.
yeah, I mean, like, why can't it be as normal as having like a heart problem, or just any other problem, a general problem with any of your body organs? It's like,
It should be, right? Because that is what it is. And it happens to be contagious, but so is a cold, so is the flu,
exactly.
so is corona,
Yeah.
right? These are all contagious. And those things like corona can kill you and if not destroy your lungs, like those, that's very serious. Most STIs at this point are not that serious. They're either treatable and curable. I know I got chlamydia last year and I was shocked. I still have no idea how it happened, but I took a pill and it was fine, right? I am chlamydia free. And for some of them, they're permanent, right? Herpes is a lifelong experience. HIV is lifelong. But the number of people that have herpes is very high, and yet we talk about it as if these people are lepers, right? Like, the herpes people. And so I follow accounts that are like, my boyfriend has herpes, or I have herpes, or like herpes positive people, because I want to know what information they're sharing, because we need to talk about it. Like, yes, it's something that happens for most people. It's an irritating, like slightly painful experience when they get stressed, and then it goes away. Like, so are pimples, right?
Yeah.
Like, people got acne, that happens too, right? Like, there's all sorts of things that some people get stomach issues when they get stressed. The body reacts to stress, and for those who have HSV, whatever, they have that reaction. And then for HIV, there are now so many drugs that are in fact addressing it and helping people's T cell counts stay high and not even showing up as positive. Like, overall, we need to destigmatize having it. We need to destigmatize the idea that like having sex is wrong and therefore needing to test is wrong. And we need to support and encourage people to get tested regularly, that it just becomes a normal part of your check-ins. If you are having sex, then you go get tested. And that's it. I was watching Pose. I don't know if you know that TV show last night. And they all got tested for HIV together. And it was so cute and supportive. But it's so scary to not know your status. And then it's also so freeing to know, so that you can take the steps that you need to address it.
Yeah, absolutely. So the question that like a lot of shows that are shot outside of India, a lot of them have shown or brought up the topic about LGBTQ communities in their shows before also. But in India, it has recently people have started enacting a gay or lesbian or a member of the LGBTQ character in movies or in a show. So I'm assuming like that is aimed to help people become more positive towards it, or may be aware or try and accept it, because seeing movie stars or TV show stars, it has an impact. So what do you think about that? Is that really helpful, or a little helpful in
So
that?
these are characters who are gay, or actors who are gay playing characters who are, or LGBTQ?
Actors who are the characters are a part of the LGBTQ that they're portraying.
Okay. And are they like generally very stereotypical? Like, are they promoting the things that
No,
Indians
like
think about them anyway?
no, like one movie came. So in that they showed it very normally, like the romance and everything very normally as it happens between a girl and a
Oh, great.
boy. So that happened, and in a lot of like shows that are not India based, in those also I have seen. So just like a general question, that in general, do
Yeah.
you think that that's going to help?
Yes, representation matters a lot. I have a company called Kaleidoscope Vibrations, and it's dedicated to increasing representation, because we know that people do better when they see themselves represented. So it's in media, in work, in medical fields, whatever it is. You want to know that other people like you exist and that they are doing well, or that they can do well. Because if you're completely erased, you feel like you just don't feel like you exist, right? That there's something wrong with you. And so yes, I definitely think that having more LGBTQ representation in media is important, because all those young people who, and also older people who identify this way, get to say, look, I am real. My experience is real. I matter. I am important enough to society to be seen. And that, I think, is a huge message that we do need to propagate more.
Yes. All right. So just one last simple question, I think, that what how does one really deal with this, with their coming out story, like, I think from the realization to gathering the courage to actually tell people.
Yeah. So the Trevor Project does a great job of they have this little star that I've given to young people that does like the different points of coming out. And it's such an individual process, right? Like, for some of us, I'm out everywhere I go, but that's because it's safe for me to be out. There are countries that will continue to kill you or imprison you if you are part of the LGBTQ community. In which case, that's not something I recommend coming out, right? Because you don't want to go to prison or be killed because of your
Mm.
identity. And so a big part of coming out is just figuring out who can you come out to, when can you come out, is it safe? If you're unsure, let's say you want to tell a parent and you don't know how they're going to react, then make sure that you know you have friends or aunts or someone who's going to support you in the case that you get kicked out. And when you do tell your parent, maybe you go somewhere in public and you tell them so that you're in a mall or at a restaurant so that they can't hurt you,
Yeah.
right? Unless that's allowed in your country as well. But like, assuming that that is not considered appropriate behavior in a restaurant to go and like try and harm your child, then that gives you a physical space. So if it gets
Mhm.
uncomfortable, then you know who you can go call, and you should always tell someone that you trust, hey, I'm coming out to this person and I don't know how it's going to go. Please keep track of me, check in. The same way that if you're going to go on a date with someone you don't know,
Yeah.
make sure that people know where you are, who you're with, because it can be scary, right? It can be dangerous. And if it's not dangerous and it's not scary, fantastic. It can just be a little bit nerve-wracking, but if it's not, then enjoy it, right? Enjoy being able to name who you are and do it. But think about how you can also take care of yourself. So if someone does not react the way that you were hoping, what is it that brings you joy that you can then do to recover from that experience?
Okay. Okay. Thank you. So that's it for my questions. Anything that you would like to say other than our questions?
Thank you for having me on the show. I'm excited about the work that you're doing. If anyone listening to this wants to follow up or get more information, I'm Yael, Yael, the Sex Geek. So I'm easy to find all over the place.
Yeah. I love your name, like your username. And so, okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ayel. It was really a delight talking to you. I really had fun in this conversation.
Me too.